This video is to show you how to graph anything you have in your y equals and to play around with your window or change your window if needed. So let's say you have some function in your y equals screen, more on that in another video, and then you want to see it graph. Again, I have a color calculator, so mine are going to appear in color. If you're just working on the TI-84, the TI-84 Plus, or even the TI-84 Plus Silver Edition, yours are going to come up as black lines instead of colors. But that's okay. So I'm going to go into Graph, and this is going to graph this for me. I'm going to actually get rid of my key press history for 1 second so I can make my graph a little bigger. Oh, there we go. And then you can see your graph. I'm going to pull back up my key press history. So now it's down here. And right now this is your standard window. Anytime you reset your calculator, this is the standard window, -10 to +10 on your x-axis, -10 to +10 on your y-axis. And then if I go into window, this is where you can change this information. So let's say you want to see it a little bit more zoomed in. You can change your min, your x min, or your lowest x value to, like, I don't know, -5. Oops. I was typing on my keyboard instead of clicking it on the calculator. My apologies. And then I want my x max, or my largest x value, to be +5. I'm just going to go ahead and type in 5. This here is how many units it's counting by, so I want it to count by ones. I don't want to change that, so I'm going to leave that. And then I want to change my y min, or my lowest y value, to -5. And I want to change my y max, or my highest y value, to +5. I again don't want to change my number of units it's counting my y values by. I want that to stay 1. I don't need to worry about anything down here. I can leave that alone. And then I'm going to go back to graph, and you see now that my x's go from -5 to +5, and my y's go from -5 to +5. So it's on a much smaller scale, and it's zoomed in. You can also use your zoom button to do this. Again, more on that later in another video. Also in your window, let's say I change this back to -10 and 10, and same thing for our y values. But now let's say I want this to count by 2s. So I have my lowest x value is -10, my highest x value is +10, it's counting by 2s along the x-axis. My lowest y value is -10, my highest y value is 10, and it's counting by 2s on my y-axis, or with my y values. I'm going to go ahead and graph it again. Now notice that this looks very similar to the graph I just had. I see that there's only 5 lines, and it's supposed to be counting by 2, but if you were to just go into your graph and see this, you would probably assume that this is only counting by 1s, or the units are only counting by 1. So if you get to your calculator screen, let's say someone else had it, you were using someone else's, let's say you didn't reset it, more on that in another video, and you wanted to double check to make sure that these units were correct, you could go back to the window, see that this is no longer counting by 1, it's counting by 2, keep that in mind as you're working and work with that. You could change that back to 1. So just always make sure that you either, 1, reset your calculator, or that you make sure, if you don't reset the calculator, make sure you go into the window and see what these numbers are counting by so that you don't end up with the wrong thing. This is not really related to the window, but really the graph itself. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to see the graph itself, and I wanted to show you a couple tricks to kind of help you with that. If you go into Format, right above Zoom, you'll get this menu, and in this menu, you can change the grid. Now, if you're just on the TI-84 Plus, it doesn't have the grid line option, but it definitely has the grid. It doesn't say grid dot, it just says grid on. I'm not entirely sure about the silver. I could change that and play around with that here later. But here I'm going to go down and go to the grid line. And I could change the color of the grid line if I wanted to. But when I go back to graph, now I have grid lines so I can really see where things are. I went through my 3 calculators on the computer to see which ones are the same, which ones are different. So the TI-84 Plus, you could change the color of the background and you'll get the grid line, plus CE, sorry. The TI-84 Plus C, you will still have the option for the grid lines and you can change the color, but if you have the TI-84 Plus or the TI-84 Plus C, the TI-84 Plus Silver Edition, you'll only have the option to turn the grid on. And when you turn the grid on, it'll look something like this. I changed the windows for each of the 3 calculators so that it all had the same, the -10, 10, and it's counting by 2s. But that's just something to kind of help you as you're graphing these.